Next up in our cinematography series is going to be the question, why? And what I mean by this is, why did you get the shot the way that you did? See, we've already answered the question of what, we already know what our subject is, and we've already answered the question of how, right? We've already got a shot set up, but now we need to ask the question of why. Why did we get that shot that way? Now, this question is very helpful to already have a shot set up before you even try and answer it, right? Especially starting out. You want to have that shot set up and ready. That way you can kind of analyze that specific shot and try and answer this question rather than trying to think of a shot, think of this question, think of an answer to this question, all while still trying to set up a shot. So have that shot ready to go, have it set up, ask the question, and if you need to jump back to the previous step to set up a new one, then great. Our hope is that eventually you get to a place where you can ask and answer this question about a shot that you're setting up in your head before it's even out live in reality. But for now, start with having a shot set up and slowly work your way up to being able to do it all in your head before your shot's ready. Now, I will say right now that this question is quite a bit different from our previous two questions, because this question deals with more of the concept and the art form behind cinematography rather than the physical how to do it. Right? The other questions have a physical right answer. If you're asking the question of what are you shooting, there will always be an answer, and it will be your subject. Now your subject will change from shot to shot, but there will still always be an answer. Same thing for the question of how. There will always be a shot that at the end of the day is set up, even if it looks different from shot to shot. But this question does not necessarily have a right or a wrong answer. This question is more trying to get you to understand your decision-making process and to get you to a place where you can defend your decision-making process. And what I mean by that is getting you to a place where you understand the steps that you took to get from A to B, right? Understand the steps that you took to get to your shot and why you got there. That is the whole purpose of this question. Because at the end of the day, if you understand the steps that you took and can defend the steps that you took, then that means you understand the ins and outs of setting up a shot. And that is that extra layer of intentionality that we are looking for when we say cinematography. So, how do you answer this question? Well, to understand this question and to be able to answer it, you really need to have a very strong grasp on the previous question, which is how, right? You need to understand all the ins and outs of how to set up a shot, because if you don't understand that, you're never going to be able to defend your answers on this question. You need to be able to understand the different components of setting up a shot. Like I said, I mentioned in that last video, and there are other videos that you can look up online, but you need to understand what framing means. You need to understand the different types of framing, the different focal lengths, the different kinds of depths that you may want in your shot. You need to understand all of that before you can defend why you put that in your shot. And I think that makes a lot of sense. See, if you understand all the ways you can set up just a shot, right? All the many different combinations of shots that you can get. If you understand how to set up a shot, then you can use this question to help you get to the shot, if that makes sense, right? Because that is how you take that step of intentionality, and that is how you help set up the best shot for whatever moment we're at in the room. And so there's always a difference between having a shot and having the shot, or at least a really good shot. And so let's use this example as a way to kind of help show you what this might look like. Let's say that I'm a roamer on stage. I have the wireless camera and I am standing next to the drum kit and I need to get my next shot. Let's say that there is a worship leader at the front of the stage and that's my subject. Okay, I've answered the first question. My what is my worship leader? Next question is how? How am I going to shoot my worship leader? Well, I'm at the drum kit, so let me just point my camera at the worship leader. Cool, that answers question number 2. Didn't take a lot, very easy. Now let's get into my third question of why. Why did I set that up that way? Well, to tell you the truth, I don't really know. I don't have an answer to that question. And that's where we should stop, because that means I've really not put any intentionality into it. If I can't answer that question, then I should probably stop and back up to a previous step. See, the shot that I've set up right here, I'm not zoomed in, I've really just pointed my camera at my subject and called it a day. But let's add some extra context and see if we can use this last question to help us better frame our second question of how, right? So let's jump back and say, maybe we're listening to a slower worship song right now. Maybe a slow song is playing and that's more of a personal, intimate song. Well, I'll tell you what, let's zoom in, right? Let's increase our focal length to get that tight, detailed shot. Like I mentioned in the last video, having those tight shots really help communicate emotion and detail. And since this is a slower song, a tight shot would pair really well with it. So I'm gonna zoom in on my worship leader. And rather than standing back in the back of the stage, I'm going to come up to my front line and shoot a shot parallel down the worship leaders rather than shooting from behind. That way I can frame my worship leader a little bit better. Now I can frame them on the right-hand side of the frame and leave my left 2/3 empty, kind of giving you that visual cue of, hey, here's this space that my worship leader is looking into that you are also looking into, giving you that extra, bit of maybe satisfaction and giving you that visual cue of looking in the same direction. And now, since I'm on the front line and I'm zoomed in tight, maybe what I can do is back up some to include some more worship leaders. They're not my focus of the shot, but I can use them to add some depth, which is going to give that visual cue to my viewer to show them some of that context of where the worship leader is at and where I am at in relation to each other, as well as in relation to the room. And so these are 3 different things that I have just added into my shot that I've also been able to answer the question of why. Why did I set the shot up this way versus the other way? Well, as I was explaining the different things I was doing, I was telling you why I was doing them. Again, I zoomed in because it's a slow song, and that tighter focal length gave you some extra detail and showcased the emotion on the worship leader's face. I framed them on the right-hand side of the frame because that helped to give you that visual cue of the direction they were looking into. And then I added that depth to give the extra spatial and visual context to my viewer that they don't have if they're not in the room. And so all of these things together, as I was explaining them, I gave you the reason why I set that up. And so you can see, if you're imagining that shot, the difference between that shot and the shot that I had previously. And so for those different things, all of that, you have to really understand those different elements when you're setting up a shot to be able to answer the question of why you use them in those capacities. So again, go back and understand the elements of how before you start trying to answer this question. Now, I do want to stop and say real quick that not every shot is going to be perfect. Not every shot is going to be great. It's just not possible to get every single shot looking the best it possibly could, because at the end of the day, we are all working as a team. And because we're working as a team, it means that the time that we have to get our shots is limited. Now, we are all about having great quality of shots, but if it means it takes too much time to get that shot, then it may not be worth the time in the first place. Like I say, we're all a team, and we as a team cannot just be waiting on you to find a shot even if it does mean it's a great shot, if it means it takes several minutes even to find that shot. So, of course, there is a balance to be had between shot quality and the time taken to find that shot. Sometimes you may have to get a shot that is a little bit less intentional. Still try and put as much intentionality as you can in the time that you have, but don't take up excess time just to add a few more layers when at the end of the day, there's a balance that has to be had, and we still need to get a shot before too long. So keep that in mind. Not every shot can be perfect. Not every shot can be great. Try and have your best level of intentionality that you can bring without taking way too much time on finding your shots. So just to recap, we're talking about the question of why, and to answer that question of why, you need to understand how to set up your shots. You need to understand the layers that go into that, and you need to be able to answer that question to defend your decision-making process. So set up your shot. Ask yourself, why did you do it that way? If you can't answer that question, I would say take a step back, reframe your shot, make some tweaks, make some adjustments, and try and get it to a place where you can answer that question, because that's going to showcase that layer of intentionality. Once you've answered the question of why, you're going to move on into the final question, which is when.